Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 5, Chapter 1, Text 15. Isha Vishrishtam hi Varun Damahe Anga
Isha Abhishtam hi avarundham
Sukham Va Gunakarma Sanga
Angam Dukham Sukham Va Gunakarma Sanga
Asthaya Tattadyat Ayum Tanathas
Asthaya Tattayat Ayunatha
Chakshush Matandha Ivaniyama
Chakshu Mata Andha Ivaniyamana.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear Priyavrat, according to our association with different modes of material nature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must therefore remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see. By material means, one cannot avoid the happiness and distress unique to his particular body. There are 8,400,000 bodily forms, each destined to enjoy and suffer a certain amount of happiness and distress. This we cannot change, for the happiness and distress are ordained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in accordance with whose decision we have received our bodies. So we think that we can change the amount of happiness or distress that we are supposed to receive in this life, but it's already been decided based on our past activities, our past desires, how much quota in life, in this life, we will we are allotted. That's already been said. Prabhupada would say that we are all trying to be happy. And so we think, oh, because we are endeavoring, that's why happiness comes. But same, we are all trying to avoid distress. We try our best to avoid, but yet it comes. So it's not that by our endeavor, it's coming by according to plan of God. How much ever He's given us a quota in this life based on our past activities, our past desires. Because then someone will say that, oh, why is God giving this one more happiness and this one less? But it's all coming from however we have acted previously. Since we cannot avoid the plan of the Supreme Godhead, we must agree to be directed by Him, just as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes. Under any circumstances, if we remain in the condition allotted to us by the Supreme Lord and follow His instructions, we will become perfect. So Prabhupada is saying follow the instructions of God, and we may say, oh, but how can I follow God's instructions? I don't know what he's saying. But he has left behind Bhagavad Gita for us. It's called the Song of God. It's for us to follow. Time and time again, he sends his pure devotees so that we can follow the instructions. The main purpose of life is to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is such instructions that constitute one's religion or occupational duty. So we may think our duty is whatever material duties that we have, but our real duty is to follow the word of God, to follow His instruction. And Prabhupada is saying it is such instructions that constitute one's religion or occupational duty. So then one may think that, oh, if I'll just follow what God is telling me to do, then my material life will suffer. No, God will never make us do anything bad. If we properly follow, everything will fall in place. So, doing our material duties also for pleasure of God. Everything for pleasure of God. Because we are part and parcel of God. So, we have a duty towards God. Just like a child has a duty to their parents. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Lord Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityagya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. Give up all other engagements, simply surrender unto me and follow me. Bhagavad Gita 18.66. This process of surrendering by following the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not meant for any particular caste or creed. A Brahmana can surrender, and so can a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. Everyone can adopt this process. So one may think, oh, I need to be belonging to a particular community so that I can read Bhagavad Gita or I can follow the instructions. No, each and every one of us is part and parcel of God. So each and every one of us is required to surrender. It's for us, not for others. We may think, oh, Bhagavad Gita is for them. No, but it's for us. As stated in this verse, Chakshusha Matandha Eva Niyamana. One should follow the Lord the way a blind man follows a person who has eyes. So Lord Brahma is saying, somebody is blind, then how does he see? With the help of another, because he is not able to see himself. So we are in complete darkness here in the material world. We are ignorant. So how can we see? By following God's instructions, Krishna's instructions. Seeing through the eyes of the scripture. Following the instructions of God, following the instructions of Krishna. If we follow the Supreme Personality of Godhead by following the directions He gives in the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, our lives will be successful. And that is really saying, seeing with the eyes of knowledge. The Lord therefore says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam eveshyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. Always think of me, become my devotee, and offer respect and obeisances unto me. Then you will certainly come back home, back to Godhead. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Bhagavad Gita 18.65. So Krishna is saying what we have to do. He's saying you want to come back home. Certainly you will come back home. What do you have to do? Think of me. Become my devotee. Offer respect and obeisances to me. So here this is Krishna who's speaking. God is speaking. God himself is speaking. So someone may think, oh, I have to surrender to something inside of God or outside of God or beyond God. No, we simply surrender to God. This is what he's saying. And in this way, we will certainly go back home, back to Godhead. Here, God is making the promise. I promise you this, he's saying, because you're my very dear friend. So if we also become devotees, then we become friends of Krishna. So always think of me. Then how can we always think of Krishna? By hearing about him. From Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This instruction is meant for everyone, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. If anyone from any division of life surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and follows his instructions, his life will be successful. So Krishna says, Sarva Dharmam Parityagya. He says, surrender unto me. And how to surrender? Krishna himself came as Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago, taught us how to surrender by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Just as a teacher, she writes A, B, C, not because she doesn't know ABC. She's writing for our benefit so we can learn. Similarly, Krishna came himself to teach us how to surrender. He came as Lord Chaitanya and gave us this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So Prabhupada is saying if anyone surrenders to God, follows his instructions, his life will be successful. The previous verse has given the analogy of bulls moving under the direction of the driver of a bullock cart. The bulls, being completely surrendered to the driver, remain wherever he wants to place them and eat whatever he wants them to eat. Similarly, being completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should not aspire for happiness or regret distress. We must be satisfied with the position allotted to us by the Lord. So one may say, oh, but I need to be happy. No, of course, because it's the nature of the soul to be happy. It's not that we are seeking out depression or sadness, but the idea is to remain in a balance, to be satisfied. When we hanker too much, our mental balance goes away. So what Brahmaji is saying, to be satisfied, understanding that God is my best friend. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the peace formula, that who is the supreme controller? We may think we are the supreme controller, but it's God who is the supreme controller. Who is the owner, supreme proprietor? We may think we are the supreme proprietor, but it's God who is the supreme proprietor. Who is the supreme enjoyer? We may think we are the supreme enjoyer, but God is supreme enjoyer. And He's the best friend of everyone. We may think we are best friends of everyone, but it is God who is everyone's best friend. If we understand this, then we will be peaceful. Gyatva mam shantim richati. Krishna, God Himself is saying, one who understands God's position as the supreme proprietor, supreme enjoyer, and the best friend, one will become peaceful. And then only after one is peaceful, one can be happy. We should follow the path of devotional service and not be dissatisfied with the happiness and distress He has given. People in the material modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with its 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate one to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. So Prabhupada is pointing out that generally we are not able to understand God's plan, but if we follow God's plan, we hear about Him, we chant His name, then we will be able to understand His plan. Not only will we be able to understand His plan, we will follow. That is, engage in devotional service. Engaging in devotional service, what's the result? We can go back home, back to Godhead. Revive our love for God. Love for God is in everyone's heart. We can revive it by engaging in devotional service. The entire world is working under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially ignorance and passion. But if people engage in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Lord, their lives can be successful and they can be elevated to the highest perfection. So by hearing and chanting about God, the glories of God, all the dirt which is accumulated in our heart, all the lust, the anger, the envy, all those, the material contamination which is there, it can go away. And we can revive our love of God. That is the highest perfection, to revive our love of God. Krishna Prema, Prema Pamartho Mahan. In the Brahan Naradya Puran, therefore it is said, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva, Nasteva Gatiranyatha. In this age of Kali, there is no other way, no other way, no other way for spiritual perfection than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. So 3 times it's repeated. If we at all want spiritual perfection, we want to go back home, back to God, and we want to realize ourselves as spirit souls, we want to understand our relationship with God, we have to chant the holy name. This is a Vedic mantra. It is there in Brihadaranyaka Puran. Many, even Bhagavatam says that those who are intelligent will worship the Lord in this age of Kali by the Sankirtana movement. So many scriptures, they are mentioning that the only way of spiritual perfection for this age of Kali is by chanting Harinam. Everyone should be given the chance to hear the holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For thus, one will gradually come to understand his real position in life and be elevated to the transcendental position above the mode of goodness. So, coming to the mode of goodness is not enough. Yes, we need to come to the mode of goodness because we need to elevate our consciousness. But that's not the goal. We have to come to the spiritual platform. We have to understand our real position. That's self realization. So, that is coming on the spiritual platform. Understanding ourselves as the soul, spirit soul. So, how can we do that? By hearing the holy names of God, by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thus, all impediments to his progress will be cut to pieces. And conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we should try to engage ourselves in his devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. So if we can be satisfied, then we can engage in devotional service. Otherwise, what happens? The mind keeps on throwing us like a football, Oh, I'm not happy now, but I was happy before. Oh, this shouldn't have happened. We lament, or otherwise we hanker. Oh, this is not a good position. If I can change this, then I will be happy. So either lamentation or hankering. It's like a football, we are going past to the future, past to the future. So, but what here Brahmaji is saying that we should try to understand, to be dependent on God, understanding it's God's plan. Be satisfied in whatever position we have and engage in devotional service. So whatever is our position, of course, it's not that we can numb ourselves. Of course, we are going to feel happy when happiness comes. Of course, we are going to feel sad when sadness comes. It's not that we have to become a stone and not have emotions. No, we will have emotions. We will be happy. We will be sad. But the idea is that we continue to hear and chant no matter what comes. That shouldn't be given up. Happiness may come, we continue hear and chant. Distress comes, we continue hearing and chanting. Understanding that it's the mercy of God, mercy of Krishna. Did anyone want to add anything?
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to share an incident. Like you mentioned previously, that taking the name of Krishna is so powerful and it takes away all our sin. So in one of the lecture, there was this small girl, and she asked a question that Prabhu, we always call out our parents because they are elders, and we are taught that we should not take the names. We just call them Papa, Mummy, Dada, Dadi, and why then? And then God is, as everybody say, God is the supreme God, God of all. And then why do we take His name, like Krishna? Why do we call Him directly by the name, though we shouldn't be? So then everybody in the audience was like, wow, she like such a nice question and everything. Yeah, and this is a nice question. Prabhuji also said, Maharaj addressed and said that, yeah, this is a nice question. But the thing is, he gave the Prabhupada example that when you say Coke, 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 does the Coke come in your mouth? No. But when you call out to Krishna, then that name, that Krishna himself is there with you. That is the power of the name. It is so powerful that Krishna himself comes and be with you. Like when you are far away and when you call Papa, Papa, your father won't be there with you, no matter you call out his name or you call out Papa or anything. But he won't be there at that moment. He won't be present with you. But Krishna's name has that power, that that name will be present with you there in that moment.
Yes,
So it was
thank
so
you.
beautiful. Yeah, even
Yeah,
I was really
intelligent girl
touched.
also. Intelligent
Yeah,
girl,
yeah, very
intelligent
intelligent.
question.
That's what Prabhuji said. That very intelligent question. So I just wanted to share because
Thank you.
somehow we might come into this situation, then we don't know what to say or what to do. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, very nice. Thank you. Yeah,
Hare
and
Krishna.
then he's answered the question also so nicely because, yeah, Krishna and his name are non-different, as you rightly said.
It's so powerful.
Krishna
Yeah.
and his name are not different. So we are with Krishna when we are chanting.
Mm.
Yeah,
Nice question. Yeah.
thank you. Mukto pitavat viprayat swadeham
Mukto
Mukto
apitavat vipriyat sudeham
Arabdam ashnan abhimam nashunya
आराब्धम्
Aradam
अश्रन्
Ashran
अभिमानशून्यः
Abhimanashunya
yatha nubhutam pratiyat nidra
यथानुभूतं
Yathanubhutam
पतियात् निद्रः
Yintva anyam dehaya gunan bringte.
किं तु अन्यदेहाय
Anyadehaye Gunan
गुणान्
Navritte.
Even if one is liberated, he nevertheless accepts the body he has received according to his past karma. Without misconceptions, however, he regards his enjoyment and suffering due to that karma the way an awakened person regards a dream he had while sleeping. He thus remains steadfast and never works to achieve another material body under the influence of the three modes of material nature. The difference between a liberated and conditioned soul is that the conditioned soul is under the concept of bodily life, whereas a liberated person knows that he is not the body but a spirit different from the body. So, conditioned soul, like us, we are thinking we are the body. Liberated soul, he is understood. He is not the body, he is understood, he is the soul. Priyavrat might have thought that although a conditioned soul is forced to act according to the laws of nature, why should he, who was far advanced in spiritual understanding, accept the same kind of bondage and impediments to spiritual advancement? So we are forced, right? Because the modes make us act. So we are forced to act. We think we are independent, freedom, we are fighting, but we don't realize how the modes are controlling us. So Priyavrat is saying, okay, one who's in the modes of nature, he's doing all these activities, but Priyavrat of pure devotee is liberated. Why should he engage in this kind of activity? To answer this doubt, Lord Brahma informed him that even those who are liberated do not resent accepting in the present body the results of their past activities. So Lord Brahma is telling him the present body, present circumstances, even if one is liberated, one has gotten the present body based on past karma, past activities. Whatever situation, even though one is liberated, the situation one is coming through is because of past karma. But of course, if one is liberated, he will act differently than one who is conditioned. While sleeping, one dreams many unreal things, but when he awakens, he disregards them and makes progress in factual life. Similarly, a liberated person, one who has completely understood that he is not the body but a spirit soul, disregards past activities performed in ignorance, and performs his present activities in such a way that they produce no reactions. So, a liberated person, because he's liberated, it's not that he's not going to act anymore. Activity is there. The soul is always active. So in the past, this same soul was conditioned, so he acted in conditioned way. Now the same soul has become liberated, so he's going to act in a liberated way. He's not going to act in conditioned way because the consciousness is purified. This is described in Bhagavad Gita 3.9, Yagnarthat karmano yatra nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. If one performs activities for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Yagya Purush, his work does not produce reactions, whereas karmis who act for themselves are bound by the reactions of their work. So Krishna is telling this in Bhagavad Gita, that work for satisfaction of God, because then that work becomes a sacrifice and it has no reaction, no good reaction, no bad reaction. It becomes a karma. So working for satisfaction of God, that is a karma. And like this, one can get out of the material world because there's no more entanglement, no more reactions. Now, what happens? We want to act for themselves. I'm going to do this because I'm going to get this. I'm going to do this because I will do this. Not keeping God in center. Then what happens? We get the reactions. Why? Because we are waiting for those reactions. You see, God is fulfilling all our desires. Paramatma is there in our heart. He hears our desire, he fulfills. So we say, okay, I'm going to do this activity. Why? Because I'm going to get this. So that's our desire, right? To get this or to do this or to become this, whatever. So we are waiting for the reactions. So the activity we are doing is a means to fulfill our desire. And Paramatma in our heart, he understands our desire. And he arranges for fulfillment of the desire. Then that means we have to be more and more, so much more time in the material world. So many more bodies we will have to take to be able to enjoy or to suffer the reactions. A liberated person, therefore, does not think about whatever he has ignorantly done in the past. Instead, he acts in such a way that he will not produce another body by fruitive activities. So before he didn't understand his spirit soul, but now he's understood his spirit soul. He has to work for pleasure of God. So he's working for pleasure of God. Whatever past is done is done. He's not going to act in that way anymore. As clearly mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Mamcha yogya vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14.26. So, the pure devotee, and one who engages in devotional service, he understands himself as Brahman. He understands himself as the spirit soul. So we have to understand there is a difference between Brahman and Para-Brahman, Atma and Paramatma. Understanding of Brahman is preliminary, but understanding I am Brahman, I am not the Para-Brahman. There is another supreme, that is higher knowledge. That's what we were reading today morning in Bhagavad Gita. We understand ourselves as Brahman, that is confidential knowledge. But understanding that, oh, we are not the Para-Brahman. There is a Para-Brahman, there is a Paramatma who's different than me. That is more confidential knowledge, higher knowledge. So how can one come to this knowledge? Engage in devotional service. The more we hear, the more we chant, the more we will get knowledge. That Bhagavatam says when we engage in devotional service, then the knowledge, causeless knowledge is revealed to us and we get detached from the material world. Because the knowledge is revealed, automatically there is detachment. So, regardless of what we have done in our past lives, if we engage ourselves in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord in this life, we will always be situated in the Brahmabhuta, liberated state, free from reactions, and will not be obliged to accept another material body. So Prabhupada is saying, okay, past whatever we've done, we've done. But now that we are hearing this knowledge, let us engage in pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means acting for the pleasure of God, acting for the pleasure of Krishna, by following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, without having any material desire. So we may say, oh, but I cannot act like this the whole day because I can act maybe for one activity. Okay, at least let's begin somewhere. Let's begin to do, okay, I'm going to do this thing today to please God, to please Krishna. This is for His pleasure. Yeah. So, hearing and chanting for the pleasure of God, or worshipping, anything, performing our duties for the pleasure of God. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sojana, Bhagavad Gita 4.9. After giving up the body, one who has acted in that way does not accept another material body, but instead goes back home, back to Godhead. So one who has acted for pleasure of God, then he goes back home, back to Godhead. There's no need to come back to the material world. Acting for the pleasure of Krishna. So then, but we are always acting to please ourselves. So the more we hear, the more we chant, the more we are reminded. It's like a reminder. Then one day we will be able to do it. You know, like when we were small, to do the times tables, to remember that. We would keep repeating till the time we would memorize it then. We could remember it. So that's why we are needed to regularly hear and chant. Vayam pramatasya vaneshva api syat.
Brahmatasya
Brahmatasya
vaneshu
vanesha
Sa aste sahasat sapat.
yata sa aste sahasat
Indriyasyat marater vadasya.
jitendriyasyaatmarati buddhasya
Raha shamakim nu karoti avadyam.
grihasrama kim nu karoti avatyam.
Even if he goes from forest to forest, one who is not self-controlled must always fear material bondage, because he's living with 6 co-wives, the mind and knowledge-acquiring senses. Even householder life, however, cannot harm a self-satisfied, learned man who has conquered his senses. So we can see, Lord Brahma is trying to convince Priyavrat in so many different ways. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Griheva vanete thake ha gauranga bale dake. Whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he is engaged in the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is a liberated person. So because Lord Chaitanya said, wherever you are, you just stay there and you hear and chant. No need to artificially change our position. Even Krishna was telling Arjuna, when Arjuna said, I will renounce, Krishna said, no, don't do that. So Narottam Das Thakur, Prabhupada is quoting, a great acharya in our life. He's saying that whether one is renounced or whether one is in material life, in grihas life, means family life. So whether one is renounced or in family life, what is the point? The importance is not whether one is renounced or one is grihas life. What is importance is what is he doing? And if he's engaged in devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is liberated person. Here this is also repeated. For one who has not controlled his senses, going to the forest to become a so-called yogi is meaningless because his uncontrolled mind and senses are going with him. He cannot achieve anything even by giving up household life and staying in the forest. So Brahmaji is saying, see, if the mind is not controlled, the senses are not controlled, you go to the forest, you're still going to be troubled. What's the use then of going to the forest? Formerly, many mercantile men from the upcountry of India used to go to Bengal, and thus there is a familiar saying, if you go to Bengal, your fortune will go with you. Our first concern, therefore, should be to control the senses. And since the senses cannot be controlled unless engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, our most important duty is to engage the senses in devotional service. So here we are trying to understand how to control the senses. We cannot stop the senses. We cannot stop our eyes not to see. How long can we do that? We cannot stop not to speak. How long? But engage in devotional service. With the eyes, see the beautiful deities. With the tongue, chant the glories of the Lord, the names of the Lord. So this is our most important duty, is to engage the senses in devotional service. So we are trying to, we have been hearing that devotional service is the duty of every soul, because every soul is part and parcel of God. So every soul has a duty towards God, and that duty is devotional service. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. Bhakti means engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord. So what is bhakti then? To engage the senses, purify. And how to purify the senses? The more we hear, the more we chant, the more our senses will be purified. The more we engage in devotional service, the more our senses will be purified. And like this, we can come to pure devotional service. Come to the platform of bhakti, prema bhakti. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchyate. Herein, Lord Brahma indicates that instead of going to the forest with uncontrolled senses, it is better and more secure to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Even household life can do no harm to a self-controlled person acting in this way. It cannot force him into material bondage. Srila Rupa Goswami has further enunciated this position. Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasagira nikhilaso api avasthasu jivan mukta sauchyate. Regardless of one's circumstances, if one fully engages his activities, mind and words in the devotional service of the Lord, he should be understood to be a liberated person. So by his body, mind and words, only he is acting for pleasure of God. Then he is liberated. Fully, all his activities, all his mind, all his words is, how can I please God? Engaging in that service. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a responsible officer and her householder. Yet his service to the cause of expanding the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is unique. Bhaktivinoda Thakur great Acharya in our line. He had a big family. He was married, he had children. He was a high court judge. He was very respected in that position. That was time of the British Empire, and they would really value the services that he was doing as a judge. But yet he's a pure devotee. He's given us so much literature, so many bhajans, and so many teachings. He is also the father of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, the spiritual master of our Prabhupada. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, Durdan Tendriya Kala Sarpapatali Protkhata Damstrayate. The sense organs are certainly our greatest enemies, and they are therefore compared to venomous serpents. However, if a venomous serpent is bereft of its poison fangs, it's no longer fearful. Similarly, if the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, there is no need to fear their activities. So, how to control the senses? Engage them in the service of God, engaging them in service of Krishna. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur is saying, just as a serpent, he still has his fangs, he still has his teeth, the snake still has the teeth, but the poison has been removed. So one need not fear such teeth. We need not fear such a snake because the poison is removed. So one who's engaged in devotional service, his senses are purified. They will act only to serve God. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement move within this material world because their senses are fully engaged in the service of the Lord. They are always aloof from the material world. They are always living in a transcendental position. So Srila Prabhupada is saying about the devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement, although they are in this material world, they are not of the world because their consciousness is always, how can I please God? So that is a transcendental position, understanding I'm not a body, I'm spirit, soul, part and parcel of God. Let me engage in God's service. Yasat sapatnan vijigishamanu.
Yasat sapatnam vijigishamanu
Graheshu nirvishyayate tapurvam.
Griheshu nirveshya yateta purvam
Ateti durgashita urjitarin.
Atyeti durgashita urjitarin
Shineshu kamam vichared vipaschat.
Shineshu kamam vichare vipaschit.
One who is situated in household life and who systematically conquers his mind and five sense organs is like a king in his fortress who conquers his powerful enemies. After one has been trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger. The Vedic system of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams is very scientific, and its entire purpose is to enable one to control the senses. Before entering household life, grihastha ashram, a student is fully trained to become jitendriya, a conqueror of the senses. Such a mature student is allowed to become a householder, and because he was first trained in conquering his senses, he retires from household life and becomes vanaprasth as soon as the strong waves of youthful life are past, and he reaches the verge of old age at 50 years or slightly more. Then, after being further trained, he accepts sannyas. He is then a fully learned and renounced person who can move anywhere and everywhere. without fear of being captivated by material desires. So Prabhupada is trying to explain to us this Varna Sharma system is very scientific. It's created by God. It's created by Krishna. Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Guna Karma Vibhakasha, this Varna Sharma society is created by me. And why? To help us to have a gradual elevation in our consciousness, to help us to learn to control our senses. So to live peacefully, enjoy the material world, understand our position in the material world, and then after some time of enjoyment, give it up to cultivate spiritual knowledge. So to be able to give up this household life, and so in order to give up the material activities and take up more of spiritual activities, some kind of training is needed, which the everyone was given at the beginning of life. The brahmachari, he was taught how to control the senses so that he could give up the grihast life later, because grihast life is like a license to enjoy the senses. But that's okay because the body is at its prime and there are needs, but because the training is there from the beginning, so then that consciousness is there. And after some time, then he wants to cultivate more and more spiritual knowledge, engage more and more in devotional service. And then by the end of life, he can completely understand. Here, Prabhupada is saying he can move anywhere and everywhere without fear of being captivated by material desires. The senses are considered very powerful enemies. As a king in a strong fortress can conquer powerful enemies, so a householder in Grasthashram household life can conquer the lusty desires of youth and be very secure when he takes vanaprasth and sannyas. So here Prabhupada is giving the example, king, he has a strong fort. Because the fort is so strong, the enemies cannot come inside the kingdom. There's a good protection. So the grihast, he has lived in such a way, he's living in such a way that he's able to control his senses. So that when he actually gives up this household life, he can gradually progress more and more, taking up more and more devotional service. Did anyone want to add anything or any comments? Or do you share anything? Let's stop here for today then. Thank you so much for listening and enjoying. Shila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.